Welcome to Evolving on Purpose with Matt Swartz. This podcast is where real leaders share the inner work behind their breakthroughs and where you'll find the tools and stories to work through whatever is holding you back from who you're meant to be so you can make the impact you're here to make and help change the world.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Evolving on Purpose. I have here with me Wren. Really excited to have them on with us. Wren is a board-certified music therapist, musician, and podcast host. They were just telling me about their podcast. In their clinical work, Wren creates an identity-affirming space where curiosity and self-exploration are encouraged, and where music is used as a tool for personal growth, healing, and community. They're passionate about using music in their personal and professional life and share interviews about meaningful experiences with music on their podcast, Magical Moments with Music. Thanks for joining us, Wren. Glad to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm going to go off book, and I want to start with the podcast. Tell me about your experience and what's drawn you to building your own podcast.
Yeah. Well, I have been on this whole journey ever since becoming a music therapist in really honing in my relationship with music and keeping what is special about music special to me and not just feeling like music is work. Music is just music therapy. And I've always been passionate about it, music. And I felt like in a way I was almost losing music personally, and it was just this professional thing. And so I've just been on this whole journey. Last year was quote unquote the year of music. And part of that was coming to terms with, I had this idea for podcasts. I want to talk about this special energy behind music. Like we've all had these really special, meaningful moments with music, whether it's, you know, you're thinking of someone you've lost and then your song comes on the radio, or, you know, you're at a concert and the artist makes direct eye contact with you during a song that meant so much to you in a hard place. And I knew that I had my own experiences with that, and I really wanted to like tap into that with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine, right? You know, you seem a similar age to me, so I'm guessing you were part of the find your passion and go make money off of it generation, which is great until we start squeezing all of the magic out of something like music that, you know, is so important to us. So it's that, how do you kind of extract back your relationship with music outside of just the, you know, kind of capitalist, sort of, Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, great. Yeah. And I would love to hear more about what that experience has been like. But the place I like to start is, you know, tell me about your journey, right? Tell me about, you know, how you got from here, how you got to here from there. And, you know, what are some of the defining moments and decisions that shape that path that you're on today? And it sounds like, you know, where we got to is, okay, I'm a music therapist. I'm providing, you know, healing and growth for people, and I'm a musician and I love this stuff. Tell me about that journey and some important moments along the way.
Yeah. So growing up as a kid, I always wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to help people. And teachers had the most direct real world experience in my life of helping me. Yeah. And then when I was in high school, I started dealing with some really severe mental health issues. I had a few psychiatric holds. I was in PHP programs, IOP programs, eating disorder programs, like whatever mental health program was for youth in my hometown, I have been there. And it kind of shifted into, I want to be a teacher someday, into, I see that therapists are hired to directly help people. So I want to be a therapist. And I eventually got, through that major depression as a teenager. A really big defining moment in that was that my parents were at their wits' end. My care team they had done everything they could do. And so we had a conversation and they said, if you don't at the very least try your best, because we know you're not trying your best, if you try your best, we'll keep working with you. But if you don't, we have to send you to residential treatment. And I loved being in band so much. I loved my friends and I loved my cat. But the big thing for me was like, I can't leave band. I can't just, what do you mean? And I remember the car ride home so clearly, knowing in my heart that I had to agree to try. And the next day, it really almost felt like my depression had just completely gone. Like having to be forced to make a decision to change just enacted that change suddenly overnight. And it was like everything in therapy I had been working on all of a sudden just clicked because it had to. And then, I've still continued to, after you deal with something so significant, I don't think that you can really ever fully bounce back. Like I'll always be a little bit more sensitive when difficult things happen. But I knew that I was in a good place. And I happened to stumble upon music therapy in a psychology textbook. All it said was that music therapy is an option for supporting people through mental health issues. And I saw that and I knew it was the career for me instantly. And then I went on to university. I had what I ended up realizing was an abusive relationship. And I had all of my mental health issues re-triggered. I had to go back into eating disorder treatment briefly. And this was all during college for music therapy. And I had all these fears about, oh my gosh, everything's coming back again. And I'm about to go into the real world and I'm going to have to be a music therapist. How am I supposed to do that? And I talked about it with my therapist at the time, and he did that therapist thing where he did that little chuckle because he's about to drop some truth and drop some wisdom on me. And I remember him looking at me and saying, Wren, like, there's a tipping point where you work and you do the work and you do the work. And then all of a sudden, you can give back. And you've done that work. And through that conversation, it was like, I felt like I could just go full speed ahead with music therapy, that I could trust myself. I ended up doing my internship. And then after my internship, I had to make the really difficult decision of what I want to do for my first job out of school. And I was living in California at the time, and it was during the pandemic. It was in 2021, and I had to make the decision to live at home and probably work in a job that I wasn't necessarily that excited about, maybe working with people that are not my ideal set of clients, or I could take a chance and move across the country. And I moved all the way to Indiana. And now I've been here as a music therapist, learning to live all by myself across the country from my family, and just being thrown into what feels like just thrown into being a real adult.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so many different aspects of this experience that I can definitely relate to. When I went to grad school, I moved to New York all alone, sight unseen, right? And yeah, it was yeah, we got to grow up now, right? We gotta be a big person. Yeah. So how long ago? How long ago did you set out on your own? Was that like super recent, or how long have you?
Almost 5 years.
Okay. Yeah. 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 So this has been
Yeah.
this has been, we're
And
more than used to it. Yeah. Or at least.
yeah, and I did say alone. I initially moved here alone, but my best friend did move with me, so I was very, very lucky in that way.
That's great.
But in terms of family unit, I don't have anything. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So I would love to hear about the 5 years in, but I'm going to back up to some of the things you shared. And I am super appreciative of your vulnerability. And if I go in any direction, that doesn't feel comfortable, feel free to tell me to back off. But going through that kind of therapy, that amount of depression, right? Like, really changes a person. Like you obviously, like, you're gaining these tools, you're gaining these skills, but you're able to go to places that other people can't go, which I think, I see time and time again for those of us that are helpers and healers that have gone into the dark cave. How have you seen that showing up for you, like, in your work today, in terms of, okay, I went there, I've been there, and now I'm engaging with people. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's helpful in some ways, challenging in some ways.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you?
I think it is challenging in some ways, but I am so grateful for it. I am so incredibly grateful for it. I think that it's, first and foremost, allowed me to just be really intuitive about a space, because I know what it's like when the group therapy participants, when we're all not feeling the activity. Like, I know how that feels.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of that kind of stuff on the clinical side, on the therapist side, was so much easier for me to identify and just recognize.
Yeah.
So the intuition is a huge one. And then I think that there are so many times in my work where I'm really not reflecting back necessarily on what I learned in school or what I learned in supervision. And it's more, God, how would I want to feel in this moment? And being able to just, I don't know, have that human experience on the other side, very, very helpful in preparing me. And I remember also when I started my clinical work in school, I remember feeling very grateful because I could see just how much of a hard time my peers were having. And I felt really comfortable because I have so many incredible role models for really good therapists and some really bad therapists too. But
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think, I'm certainly a fan of, I think at my core, I'm a humanist, right? And this is about, this experience being a therapist, being a coach, right, is about relationship, right, fundamentally. And, that relationship, of course, is easier when, you can identify with rather than expertise. And yeah, I think that makes tons of sense that you're watching some of your cohort really struggling because, this is not an academic, you can't memorize a list and go in.
Right.
It's this very, it's obviously it's a relational experience, and being able to, cognitively, but also intuitively identify with how people are feeling and what they need in that moment. And yeah, I absolutely know what you mean. Like, they're not into this. Yeah, I've been there, right? Like, I know what that's right. I'm in a session, I get the dead eyes. I'm like, yeah, no, I feel that way sometimes. I know what you're, I know what you're feeling. So, yeah, that's really powerful. I'm glad that you feel like it's mostly an asset. I think that probably speaks to the level of healing you were able to do, because I don't think it's black or white. I think, all of it exists on a continuum. But there's definitely, like, I've encountered plenty of therapists that or healers or, any of that. It doesn't have to just be therapists that are still pretty unaware of, some of their BS and how it's, showing up in the room, so I'm glad it sounds like you've gotten pretty deeply in touch with yourself in a way that allows you to see some of that. So that's really awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think really the one area where I feel like it is a disservice is that it hasn't happened in a long time, but especially when I was newer to the field, sometimes I'll kind of get into that old same thought pattern that I really knocked out with my old therapist and think like, oh gosh, it could easily just as well be me on the other side. And that may be true, but that does not mean that I don't have something really valuable to offer.
Yeah, for sure. Are you, Wren, are you into parts work at all?
Yes.
So I just find like those moments, what's really helpful is like, there's a part of me, right? Like there's a part of me that this, and there's a part of me that, like, and there's allowed that part of me that, grew during those experiences that feels, some of those things like, there's still parts of that in there. And that's not, my job isn't to destroy that. My job is to be able to work effectively with it, right? In that moment, can I validate that part of me? Can I comfort that part of me rather than trying to fight it or push it away? Because that just increases the anxiety, right? And now you're fighting against yourself, and now you're trying to prove yourself, and now and it's. But I think most healers feel that way, right? I've certainly gone through big, phases of my work where I'm like, what am I even doing? Like my life is not that, like I don't have it all figured out. What if I'm totally, wrong, right? What if I have no idea, and that waxes and wanes. And I'm lucky that right now I'm in a space where I'm like, no, I know what I'm doing. I got this handled, right? But there's certainly been weeks that I'm like seeing patients and I'm going like, I don't know if I'm saying anything that like it, not that is helpful. Like, I don't think I'm ever not feeling like I'm helpful. It's just like, what if I'm wrong about this? I don't know. What if that's what comes up for me. So I think lots of us experience that. And I think that would be normal with or without some of the experiences that you've had.
Yeah.
So, I would love to talk more about that healing and growth journey. So I love the experience that you shared of like that kind of moment. And I agree with what you're saying that it's not the moment, like the moment is a tipping point. It's all of the little pieces and parts that got added up. But what seems to happen, or what happened for you, is that the fear of the loss of that thing that was really important to you was greater than the all of the other kind of emotions that were driving you in a direction. And that, it just kind of speaks pretty obviously to the fact that, band was both important, probably musically and also socially for you.
Yes.
I think, have you, in your work now, like, have you seen anything similar for any of your clients in terms of that, like, they were having a hard time shifting, and then eventually there was kind of this inflection point. And if so, I'm curious how, you've kind of seen that present itself in the work that you're doing now.
I think if I had been doing work this whole time in maybe a different context, in a different setting, I would answer yes, but I would probably say no, because the nature of my work, is a little different. I work in disability waiver services, and I think just a lot of my work is, I wish that I was doing a little bit more of the deeper work, but I think unfortunately, just because of the system, I feel like sometimes I'm just having to help people with really basic advocacy that doesn't allow for like that bigger growth. It's really difficult for me to help someone go deep if we have to spend half of our session arguing with their staff to make sure that they get their phone bill paid because it hasn't been paid in a month.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I don't have a good, I don't have a good answer for this one.
Yeah. So a lot of the work that you've been doing recently is a lot of like boots on the ground, really like in there with them kind of work. And that's great. Like, it may be difficult in certain ways, but it's really important in other ways. And I've certainly been through, I was a prison therapist for a couple of years, and I was, in substance abuse for a couple of years. And the reality of that was sometimes you're just doing triage, right? Sometimes you're just trying to help people with some of the really basic stuff. And I certainly wouldn't want to put it in a hierarchy at all. And so I was just, interested in sort of what resonated for you. So then I'll take a different direction instead. So, you described that moment, that turning point moment for you. Have there been other moments, outside of therapy, through your life where, you ended up having to grow in ways that you didn't necessarily anticipate or choose, that you might not have grown on your own because of, different experiences that happened for you?
Gosh, I actually feel really drawn thinking back to this past summer. I feel like I was really thrown a curveball. I very unexpectedly had to move, and all within the same month I had to move, and my best friend got married, and I was the officiant and the wedding singer. And so actually within 7 days was the moving day, flying out, bachelorette party, the wedding, everything. And I was put in this position for the first time since college, since before the pandemic, where I had no choice but to just keep on going, keep on moving. And it was incredibly exhausting. It took me about a month to fully recover. And it was interesting. It really served as this reminder that all of the work that I have put in all of these years, all of the therapy I did back when I was a teen, it's still paying off because something like that back then, oh gosh, that would have destroyed me. I would have been out for months, completely triggered. But I think the further and further I go in my journey, the more that I realize how resilient I am and how much that work when I was a teenager really continues to hold me throughout my life.
Yeah, totally. So like you just imagine like all of that going on at once. It would shut you down. You'd have been stuck. You would have, it would have had that, like maybe sort of typical depressive, like months afterwards of like recovery. And that's so cool when you can see those moments where you're like, oh yeah, like this is it, right? Like the resilience is here. Like this is a product of all that work. I had this client who, I do a lot of EMDR work with my clients. And the long story short is they ended up in a situation, they've been doing a lot of work for a long time. There was a lot of trauma. They ended up in a situation where their house started to catch on fire. And they were walked, they were like very calm and regulated through the experience. And they were able to like walk outside, and their spouse was not so regulated about it. And, we had a conversation after that, and she was like, that's the trauma work, man. Like I was able to stay really regulated through what, I would have broke out, but it pays off. And a similar experience for me where, recently we had a premature daughter who ended up in the hospital for a couple of months. And it was just that same feeling of like, the work's paid off, like all of these years of trauma work and all of these years of, really hard stuff. I was deeply surprised how regulated I was able to stay during the experience. And there was a lot of reasons, it's also community and it's, different things but I totally can understand that. Like, I was able to be there during that. So that must've been a really awesome feeling, Wren.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And it felt so good to push myself not out of necessity, but it was, I love my best friend and I care about her and I want to make sure I'm there for her on her special day. And there were so many, I mean, I had a good attitude about it because I knew it was all because of something really special.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I think it's a really important thing for people to hear, whether, whether you are a young teen doing some difficult work or whether you're a leader that's like in the dark night of the soul experience, like do the work, like it will get better and you will have experiences on the other side where you will be able to see the payoff. You may not see it right now, but it sounds like, Wren, that you've lived that. And, I don't know, is there like, if you could go back, what would you, if you were sitting in the room with that younger version of yourself that was just like really struggling and really in it, like, what would you want to say to them?
So interesting. I think about that often, and normally I don't feel very emotional, but today it's really hitting. I think I don't want to say too much to my younger self because I know where I end up and I feel really proud of that. And it's almost like I don't really necessarily feel like I want to give too much advice to my old self because I kind of have to fail and really fuck it up to be where I am today. Yeah. But I think I would really just want to offer a lot of affirmation of things are really hard. They will be really hard and they will be really beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, Wren, I think a lot of us feel that, like, in retrospect, advice wouldn't have helped, right? Like that's not, not needed, but more hugs, like just that, like you said, like, yeah, I would be lying to you if I told you this was going to be easy. Like this isn't going to be easy, but it will get different. I even worry about better, right? Like, better, maybe less painful, right? Yeah, I think it tells me a lot about where you're at in your journey, that the answer is, I recognize that I wouldn't fix it for myself. I couldn't. And instead, really, yeah, affirmation and compassion seems the most important. That's, I think, a particular point in the healing journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, tell me maybe about some of the moments where you were able to ask others for help, right? So, there's the therapy, there's coaching, mentorship, relationships, community. I think we focus a lot in this work on, the individual component, which is great. But, in the sort of the last few years of my work, it's very apparent to me that, individual therapy does not fix, systemic, cultural, community, economy, politics, right? These things are so much bigger than that. And I just think relationships and community hold such an important place in all of this. So I'm curious for you, what place has that held and what's that looked like along your journey for you?
This reminds me of when I was in college and I had my severe eating disorder relapse. And at the time, I was having a hard time with eating consistently. It was on the restrictive side. Yeah. And I made what's it called? I made a meal train for myself and I made it for myself. Normally people make it for other people. I made it for myself. But I also specified that I don't need people to bring me a meal. I just need someone to come eat with me. Mm-hmm. Like you can bring your own food, or we can go out, or I can cook for you. But I just need someone. If I have one meal a day with somebody, that's going to really help because then I can center the rest of my eating around that meal. And it can be that framework for my food intake for that day. And I was really lucky that I had really wonderful people and that came by and made eating with others feel normal again, really brought me community, and it helped me just with my mental health in general, just getting another opportunity to spend time with people. And I have some really sweet memories with people that, I didn't normally spend a lot of time with, but I remember that they showed up for me during a difficult time.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. And, I am not the world's leading expert on eating disorders. I've definitely had my share of clients that have experienced that. And, some of the approaches, right, that are very, structured and forceful and, all of those things, what a contrast to say, okay, what I need right now is connection. Right. That's what's going to get me to, this goal here. That I think shows how much work you'd already done, that you had the insight to recognize that. Because I think that would be really hard to recognize for a lot of people when they were in the middle of that experience.
Yeah. And I think something that I look back on now that I wasn't thinking about at the time was, I think that looking back, and having this almost bird's eye view, I'm thinking about the fact that, eating disorders are very stigmatized, especially eating disorders in people who are fat, who live in larger bodies. And I look back and I'm like, I didn't feel any shame about being open about that and all that and asking for help. And I am almost in awe of my past self, because I think that it was a bigger deal than I thought at the time. I think in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to ask people to eat with me. But now with that hindsight, I'm like, wow, I'm really proud of myself for putting myself out there and being open about my experience and asking for help and then accepting it when it was offered.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, I think it is a bigger deal than you might. I mean, it seems like a big deal to me. Have there been times beforehand or afterwards where asking for that help or seeking that help has been harder for you?
Absolutely. I think it's been harder to ask for help now as a music therapist, now that I've been on my own and I've kind of settled into what it looks like to be an adult living far away from your family. And I think it was easy for me to ask help in the beginning because I don't know anything. I'm from far away. This is my first time paying utilities, all these things. And, and now that I'm settled, I feel like, oh, I'm an adult. I'm on my own. I'm not new anymore. So I think sometimes I have to push myself now at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, this is one of the themes that I see time and time again, which is part of a reason that this is such an important question for me is, there is this interesting, I'll think of the word in a second, but, where the more, independent or successful or stable I get, the less able I feel to ask for help. And I don't think you're alone in that. So I think it's good for people to hear, are there ways that we're kind of talking through this, are there ways that you're seeing a potential of challenging that right now? Is that like, as we're reflecting on that, is that something maybe important to poke yourself a little bit on? Or do you see that as something that needs to kind of stay that way for now for you?
I feel like yes and no, because I'm not in a place where I necessarily need a lot of help right now.
Yeah.
But I know I will be, because life will happen to me. So it feels like something that could be pushed, but it's not begging to be pushed
Yeah,
in this
you don't
moment.
need to right now. Yeah, totally. So just no, it's just one of those awarenesses. So like, okay, I'll put a little asterisk on this one, and
Exactly.
right? Yeah. Just being aware. Yeah, that's great. So, which is kind of a good segue. So one of the questions I often ask is like, okay, what I believe based on the work that I've seen, right, is that patterns that help us get from A to B tend to prevent us from getting from B to C, right? That basically, the things that once upon a time were helpful aren't serving us as well. And so I'm curious if whether it's a pattern that has served you previously, but now you're having to challenge, or whether it was, something that you saw earlier in your journey. Was there a pattern at any point that you saw as really helpful for you, that helped you succeed on some level, but then eventually you learned was becoming unhelpful and you had to grow beyond?
It's funny because I think the pattern that I am actually thinking of is not asking for help. and I think it really has, been solved by just being vulnerable and open. And I think it's kind of a reminder that I kind of have to keep that open-mindedness to support and, allow that to carry me through my journey.
For sure. I think one of the things that's important, because I heard you, there's like maybe something behind a door and we don't need to go behind that door. But what's important, I think, is that most of the time as we move into the vulnerability, the help comes to us. And that like there's this picture of like, oh, I'm going to have to fight really hard for the help. And while certainly there are some times that, we can't get the help we need because of different circumstances, a lot of the time I find that the help isn't coming because we haven't asked for it. We weren't vulnerable. We didn't let anybody know. So nobody's coming. Right. And then, I think that can be really important for people to hear that, and it sounds like, for the most part, Wren, like, you have practiced vulnerability, and that's been something that you've been able to grow in from the earlier in life point to the story you told us in college. So I think it's good advice for, people out there of like, vulnerability, I think, is a skill, right? Authenticity is a practice, right? These things don't come overnight. So one of my more final questions would be, what we're focused on, in the podcast, Evolving on Purpose, right? It's intentional. So my curious question would be, what does living on purpose actually mean to you right now in the reality of your day-to-day life, not as an idea, right? What does that look like for you?
So funny you say that. Because I really think for me, that's just living in the moment and really just appreciating life. And it's so funny actually, because it brings me to right before this interview. I went out to the grocery store with my best friend, and we were on the way, and we saw an ice cream stand that we've never seen. And I was like, let's go. It's a hot day. Let's get some ice cream. And I think it sounds so simple. But to just be present enough and just to be open enough to just, let's just go get some ice cream. Yeah. I've come a long way. So I think really just being true and authentic to my feelings in the moment. If I'm uncomfortable in a situation, leave. If I want some ice cream, go get some ice cream.
Yeah. Yeah. And it may sound simple, but it's so important, right? Like, I think, again, time and time again in my work, we know often there's certainly the stage where you don't know what you're feeling. But as you've done that work and you know what you're feeling, but are you listening to it? Right. And again, it can be simple things. If you can't do it with the simple things, you can't do it with the bigger, harder things. Right. So I know what I'm feeling right now. Like you said, drawing a boundary, walking away, saying no. Right. Like, that's so important rather than people pleasing, letting it keep go on. And then, the moments where you're like, I want that. I'd like to try that. I'd like to go there. Right. I was talking with a client who was a little different, but the same, like wanted to dive into the ocean at a place he was on a coast. Right. And he spent a day and a half arguing with himself about it. Right. And that eventually he was able to, but it's actually a lot harder. Like we say, live in the moment. It's harder than we give it credit for. So I think it is a really important practice for sure. So final question, Wren, as we kind of wrap up here, if your life and your work ultimately succeeded beyond what you could imagine, what would you hope changes in the world because you were here?
I would hope that the conversations that I've had, that I will have in my podcast and in my work as a music therapist, I hope that because of me, because of my legacy, people are more welcoming to using music intentionally in their lives. And I love passive music listening. I love music engagement of any kind, but it would feel so special if, because of me, people put just a little bit more intention into their music and used it to support their life, whether it's cheering themselves up, creating community with one another.
Yeah. Music can be a really powerful force. So I'm definitely, I'm saying I did musicals. So I'm definitely on your team here. As we wrap up, because I just want to go a little deeper into that. So remind us one more time of the name of your podcast.
Magical Moments with Music.
Magical Moments with Music. So check it out. Tell me about one of the best moments you've had so far. I know you're kind of early-ish in the podcast, but tell me about one of your favorite moments so far you've had producing it.
Oh, so far. So the podcast is very new and kind of uncharted territory. And part of what I'm doing is I'm also trying to have actual musical experiences with some of my guests. So some interviews have a music component or like a separate bonus music episode with it. And I got to write a song with an old college friend based off of a book that we really like. And getting the opportunity to write music with someone in a way that was not clinical, all that for the first time was so fun and so special. And, part of this podcast is hearing about other people's stories, about how they have changed their relationship with music, how music has impacted their life. And part of the podcast is also giving that back to me and giving me an opportunity to explore that with other people and write this new story for what music can look like in my life. And that collaboration was the first experience of that. And it was really exciting, really enjoyable, so creative. And it's made me so excited to see all of the other magical moments that I'll have with my guests on the podcast.
I love that. And, I think it's the same for any podcaster. Part of this is the joy of sharing this, but, we get to do the thing that we love, right? Mm-hmm. And there's nothing I love more than having these conversations with people and, you're really loving that, being in that music. So that's tremendous. So thanks so much for being with us today, Wren. We're going to wrap up here. If this episode resonated with you and you're doing this kind of work in your own life, make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening, so you don't miss out on what's coming next. And if you know someone else who's on this path, share this with them. This work isn't meant to be done alone. And that's why we're building this community together. So let's keep the conversation going. You can follow along on Instagram for more reflections, tools, and conversations between episodes, and let us know what you want to explore next. At the end of the day, this is about more than just a podcast. It's a movement. It's about a group of people choosing to grow, to heal, and to step into the lives they're meant to live so that we can make the impact we're here to make, the kind of impact the world actually needs. Thanks for being here. And as always, let's keep evolving on purpose together.